So, greetings, hello. This is Dr. Thomas Daffern again here, speaking on the 9th of February for my weekly Sunday fast and talk and convivial sharings. Greetings to all my friends throughout the world. I hope you get around to listening to this. Today's quite a historic day for many reasons. Not least it's the general election results in Ireland. And I'll be talking about that a bit later, which has huge impact on Brexit, of course. But I'm going to start talking not so much about Brexit as my usual thing. I'll get round to that a bit later. And I've got a board, as you can see. I'm going to do a bit of noting of stuff that I think you might be interested in. So it's a kind of teaching session, slightly more than my normal habits. Okay, the first thing I want to talk about is the peace plan that has been tabled on the agenda of the world community. And for those of you that aren't aware of this, so this is to do with Israel and Palestine. So my first point is to do with what's called the TRCME, which stands for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission for the Middle East. Now, I set that up. I don't know why I should have to do it, because you'd have thought, it should have been done years ago. But I was inspired by the South African project of Desmond Tutu to set up first the Truth and Reconciliation Commission for Stonehenge, which I set up in the late 90s with George Fursoff, a pagan priest. And we've had about 30 meetings there all this time. Anyway, eventually, long story, ended up going to Palestine, Israel several times, meeting people, and thought, let's have a similar thing, but on a bigger scale for the Middle East. And why should it fall to me as just, a normal kind of guy and a Druid Christian sort of philosopher? I was working on my PhD thesis, of course, at the time, and that's all about interfaith conflict resolution. So it seemed logical that I should be the guy to do it, actually. And I wrote it up partly for my PhD thesis at the University of London. And I think it gave me a certain objectivity, because I'm neither Palestinian nor Israeli, but I'm a lover of both cultures. I know Palestinians, I know Israelis very well. I have dear friends, and have done for years, meeting them at conferences and, out and about in the streets of Bethlehem and Jerusalem, wherever. Like Prince Charles going walkabout recently in Bethlehem, I met some incredible people, and I love both sides of this dispute. So that's why I did it, and so that's why I'm now doing a detailed study of the Trump Netanyahu peace plan, which they presented to the international community at a big conference in Washington. And I'm doing kind of line-by-line critique of it, which I'm happy to send to colleagues if they want a copy of it. It's going to members of the World Intellectual Forum and my Institute of Peace Studies and Global Philosophy. That's why I'm writing it. And for those of you that, these are acronyms. You may have come across these acronyms. IPSCIP, the International Institute of Peace Studies and Global Philosophy, is the thing that I set up with colleagues at the University of London. Way back, can you believe it, in 1991, when I was working at the Institute of Education, I was the feasibility research officer going into all this. I was starting out on my PhD, so I was partly working for the university to create an Institute of Peace Studies, which was brought into being. That's its full title. We don't have a base, sadly, in Bloomsbury. The plan was to have like a whole building in Bloomsbury, like many other institutes. There's an Institute of Germanic Studies, for instance, in Russell Square. There's the Institute of Commonwealth Studies there. I still think there should be an Institute of Peace Studies as part of the University of London in Bloomsbury, and I'd love to, see that come into fruition eventually, because the University of London is a great place strategically and intellectually for discussing these issues. But at the meantime, there's my IPSCIP, which is like a holding body. Unfortunately, there'd be a political will needed to create such an institute. It'd be a major national project. So meanwhile, so I'm commenting on this Trump peace plan from both, perspectives. The TRC for the Middle East is a project of the IPSCIP, of which I'm the director, and I hope to pray that I've got enough objectivity but mingled with compassion to be able to comment on Trump's peace plan, with some degree of, informational background, really. I mean, having been to the area, knowing the problems, knowing the people involved. I'm not one of those people that say it should be totally dismissed out of hand. There's been a lot of negative press about the Trump peace plan, saying, oh, it's, just an election foil to make him look good, and Netanyahu. I'm sure that's part of it, but I suspect they had a team of experts who've given some thought to it. You can tell from the wording they have thought it through. In some respects, there are serious problems with it, and for instance, the absolute demonization of Hamas and people that are in Gaza. The Israeli bias of the document is obviously profound. So I've had to comment on all that, and I point out you can't have a mediation or a conflict resolution if your first condition is that the other guys, lie down and die. I mean, that's not how it works. So there are streaks of amateurishness about the document. I also lament the fact that it wasn't drawn up, as far as I can tell, with any input from Palestinian intellectuals of any kind whatsoever, or spiritual leaders, or academics, or conflict resolution specialists. There are lots of them in Palestine. I know a few of them. They're amazing intellectuals in Palestine who want peace, who would be prepared to sit down and work something out, who helped with the Oslo Accords, which were not, successful finally, but at least they were a step in the right direction. Unfortunately, the guy who helped that, Rabin, was then assassinated by an extreme right-wing Israeli a couple of years after he signed the Oslo Peace Accords. That's how people get afraid of the concept of fear. I experienced it when I used to go and talk to people who were doing war studies and things at the University of London, say, hi, I'm setting up a peace studies institute. They'd look at me like I was the devil incarnate. Because for them, war is a sort of established business. It's been a racket for thousands and thousands of years. Ever since urbanization on the planet first brought the surplus that could create armies, and we had the technology to make weapons and iron swords and so on. War's become a huge, never-ending racket. And so peace is a kind of threat to the warlords of the planet. Well, okay, fine. Threat time, guys. Peace is coming. I'm on that team. I'm on the peace team. And it's time these warlords are called to account, because we can't go on with this indefinite carte blanche to carry on with your wars in the Middle East. That's why this peace deal is so important. And I hats off to Trump and Netanyahu for actually tabling it, because they have the nerve to do it. And I respect that. I think they've got a lot wrong, and as long as they're willing to now sit down with critics like myself and many Palestinians who will be saying, hey, what about, then we might be able to get somewhere. If they're presenting it in a you take this whole thing or you leave it way, then that's not kosher, it's not appropriate, it's not right. And Mr. Gantz, who's standing against Netanyahu, has made much more humble voices saying, yes, it's a good peace plan, he'll support it, but he wants to discuss it with the others, i.e. Jordan, Palestinians and Egypt and so on. Of course you do. So anyway, just to say that's one thing I've been working on, is doing a detailed comment on that. So the next thing I want to talk about is, some people say, no, you can't do that seriously, Thomas, don't take it seriously. It was produced by evil people, Trump is evil, Netanyahu, So, well, I want to slightly differ on that, because we've had a long debate in the Anglican Church over many centuries, and in the Christian Church generally. Can the sacraments of grace be administered by a undeserving or wicked priest? In the church, if I go to church and take the sacraments, communion, and the priest turns out to be a bad person, he's in league with the mafia or he's corrupt or whatever, does that mean that it's invalidated? What about if I was baptized by a priest who turns out to be a wicked chap? Well, the church eventually came to the view that no, it doesn't invalidate these sacraments. They're things ultimately you do between you and God. So when you're baptised, I was baptised at the University of London when I was in my late 20s. That's between me and God. The bishop who did it, he was the suffragan Bishop of London, Bishop of Fulham. I don't know him, I never met him. I mean, I think he must have been a good man, I hope so. But if it turned out he, was a wife beater and he was sacked from the church, it doesn't invalidate my baptism. It still stands in the eyes of God. And I take that same idea into this discussion. So, okay, Trump and Netanyahu, they do have their faults. Nobody's accusing them of that, of not being, with feet of clay in many respects. But they have come together and they have tried to table this thing. And unless it's done in a totally cynical way, like we've presented this in a way that we know you're going to reject it, so then we can clamp down much harder and annex the West Bank territories and ban trade with Jordan and all the rest of it. I mean, that's a very cynical possibility. And I do raise this as a possibility in my comment. I mean, it's possible they are that cynical. And the whole thing is a PR job, simply so they can then crack down even worse on the Palestinians and say, we offered you peace, you didn't want it, so bash, 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 Well, I hope it's not like that. If it is, we'll see through it. I mean, the international community are not stupid. The press, the media, these people, we know what we're seeing here. And if it's that cynical, well, it'll come out, This is why it's very important people keep tabs on what's going on in the White House. And it's incredible that Vindman and these people of conscience are being literally marched off the premises. It's a bit like Dominic Cummings refusing to allow journalists into number 10. I mean, they think they can create a sort of fascist dictatorship at the heart of a democracy. It can't work, guys, and I'll be explaining why not. But I mean, they are certainly trying. But anyway, okay, so a kind of thumbs up to the peace plan in principle. The details need serious working through. And that's what I'm doing, and I'm doing it on behalf of these bodies. I will send a copy to anyone that wants. With goodwill, as long as I'm not being attacked by malevolent forces. Okay, then we have the next point I want to make about Trump and watching his impeachment trial, which wasn't a trial. There were no witnesses. It's I think a bit of a farce in that should have had witnesses. We should have got to the truth. I mean, it's, as a member of the international community, we want to know, is this American president totally, corrupt? And if he is, then he should be impeached and got rid of. That's for the American people to do, but we, the international community, can watch on with horror, as it were. So why did the Senate not allow the trial to happen? I mean, they in effect blocked the trial. I think personally, if I'd been a Democrat senator, I would at that point postpone the trial. I think it's in their constitutional right to postpone the trial, and then proceed to force the witnesses to come forward in another context under subpoena in the Congress. They could have found some way to constitutionally get these 4 witnesses they wanted to be by law obliged to come under penalty of prison or whatever. Surely there must have been a way around this. Now they're saying they're going to do that anyway, but post hoc, having found him not guilty. Well, that was a strategic error by the Democrat senators, in my opinion. They should have postponed the trial, and they should have raised the constitutional hullabaloo that it may not say it in writing anywhere, but obviously the intention of having a trial in the Senate is you have a trial, and that must mean witnesses and evidence and documents and so on. You can't have a trial without. That's bonkers. So the Republican senators have pulled the wool over people's eyes. They've done a scurrilous, fake pseudo victory. Well, it's time the American people got wise. Time, they all got their law degree books out and did their trainings and realised that their democracy is under threat from this administration. Trump is acting and believes he has, divine sanction, probably. I think he's believing he has divine sanction to do whatever he wants. Well, if that means colluding with foreign powers against the interests of the American people, that is treason. There's no 2 ways about it. It's treason. And he should be impeached. So that's my comment on that, and I've written a letter about this to some of the people involved. My proposal, as ever, is very simple: to reform the democratic processes, both in the USA, UK, and everywhere else that wants a democratic functioning kind of government. There's one simple rule we have to introduce, and that's requiring politicians, senators, congressmen, MPs, lords, in the Rajya Sabha and the Lok Sabha in India, to tell the truth. As simple as that. And conversely, to not tell lies. Now, if they're found to lie about something, and I'm talking not about their private life, their personal life, or trivia, like what did you have for breakfast, No, I mean serious stuff, like what is the policy of your party towards X? Or what will you do in such and such a scenario? Official stuff. Or did you meet that ambassador from such and such country? Or did you speak to that president on the phone? That they all have to tell the truth about that. And that includes cabinet members of the US administration and in the UK, and civil servants and so on. What we need to do is create a bias towards truth. At the moment we have, and it's very interesting, the new book that's come out by James Comey, who ran the FBI for many years, and clashed with Trump on this point. Comey said we've got a president who's created an atmosphere of lies, and worse, that's okay, that's acceptable morally. Well, no, in a democracy you can't have politicians that willfully lie all the time and believe they can get away with it. Why not? Well, representative democracy depends on your senator, your congressman, your MP, or whatever, going to Parliament and doing stuff, and then reporting back to us, the people. And it only works if they report back honestly what they've done or seen. I mean, they might have policy differences, and that's fine, that's not lying. If you go to your MP and say, I want you to abolish all, MOTs, because I think they're unfair and they penalise the poor, well, the politician can say, interesting idea, and go to Parliament, and then not speak about that in Parliament. And he comes back and he says, no, I didn't do that because I don't agree with that policy. Actually, I think MOT should be two-tier. So there's the basic MOT for poor people who can't afford the whole whack. And that's just to make sure the car works and it's not, a danger. And then there's the full whack MOT that everything works, the radio, all the different gizmos that you get in modern cars, and that's much more expensive. And that's for the rich. Well, that's common sense, right? And so the point I'm making here is that discussion of policy isn't about lying. It's about having an intellectual debate about what is good for the country. What is lying is coming back and saying, total lies and fibs, and going to Parliament and saying them. And then, if you're caught, my proposal is you lose office. No ifs or buts. No, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. No, automatically, one lie and you're out. This would totally transform politics in America and in Britain, and in India and wherever else that adopted it. Is it so weird to be suggesting this? Well, it sounds it. I mean, look, hang on, since Machiavelli it's been accepted that we can all lie. Well, no, it hasn't, actually. No, it hasn't. Machiavelli only said, like in very, very special circumstances, to protect, a state, occasionally can the prince lie, but not like every day, and certainly not to be caught out. That's just like not acceptable. So, anyway, that's my proposal. That's what I've written to the various officials in Washington as a global citizen. I want to come on to my next point now, my third point really, which is about the World Intellectual Forum, which is another body that you've heard me probably talk about. I call it the WIFE, World Intellectual Forum, which is a new initiative set up in 2017 to create a forum of intellectuals around the planet, like Davos is for economists and politicians. The World Economic Forum. We're the other think tank that deals with bigger issues, general, more joined up intellectual issues. So we're open to poets, playwrights, philosophers, historians, intellectuals generally, define what an intellectual is, but it's someone that can think in more than one box. The word intellect actually means to connect ideas up. Intellect. Latin is a term for the ability to join up different words and ideas in your mind. An intellectual is someone that can draw on many, many different thought spheres simultaneously and marry them up. A bit like Ken Wilber talks about, the integral ability of certain types of thinkers to join up all the levels and quadrants, to use his vocabulary. Well, an intellectual is someone that can range freely around that whole tree of knowledge, to use the Kabbalistic term, or the biblical term. So, okay, so what are we doing? The World Intellectual Forum has just met in India. We've issued a declaration, which I'm happy to send. And we were meeting jointly with the International Conference on Peace and Non-Violence, organised by the Jain community, the Anaviba. And we issued a declaration about the importance of non-violence and training for non-violence. It should be in school curriculum around the planet. Now, in my comment on the Trump peace plan, there's a very important line where it says, we will only accept if the Palestinians agree to non-violence, to a non-violent solution. Well, okay, the point I make in my critique of the plan is, wow, suddenly the word non-violence is appearing in an international document as a peace plan. Yet to expect the Palestinians to go from firing rockets, which is what the people of Gaza are doing, or the Hamas people, because that's all they've got. They have no other way of registering their protest at their dire situation. And it's to do with the pride dynamics of their own culture. The people of Gaza, 75% of those people are under the age of 25 and under. They're young, the people of Gaza, but they have no jobs, no hope. They get their degrees even, and there's unemployment facing them. Life is a daily struggle of survival. And these rocket firings, it's the only thing they've got that makes them feel, we matter, we are important people. Everyone needs that self-esteem. The only solution, the only way to get the rocket stopped is to give them something that they realise they're loved, they're welcomed, they're honoured by the international community, they're heard. We haven't forgotten them. And the peace plan is, I think, a first step on that way. But to expect them to immediately, before discussions, to plump for non-violence is like asking a dodo bird to suddenly fly up in the air at 75 miles an hour from standing still. No, you need to train people to non-violence, to educate them as to what non-violence is. Most people have never heard of non-violence as an actual strategic, technical mode of resolving conflicts. And it has a tradition, it has a history. I ran the School of Non-Violence in London from Kingsley Hall with the Gandhi Foundation for some years, and I still run this School of Non-Violence. Satish Kumar used to run it before me. We need a school of non-violence that can train people, like Mubarak Awad was trying to do among the Palestinians, to find a different way of resolving conflict. Okay, my late colleague Tony Weaver and I worked on this, and it's always been part of the work of IPSCIT. We want a school of non-violence right there in Bloomsbury, where people can come from all over the world, including Palestinians, Israelis, and realise that, hey, we don't need to start shooting. Maybe there's a non-violent way of dealing with this. It's a huge field. So, yes, let's have, please, as soon as possible, non-violent solutions to the Israeli-Palestinian dispute. But for that we need training, we need expertise, we need education. Is it in the curriculum of Palestinian schools and universities? Is it in the Israeli curriculum? Is it in the British or the American? Well, it ought to be. I'm in touch with people throughout the world that are working on non-violence education, but we're so few compared to the problems. Where's the professorships? Where's the chairs in non-violence at universities around the world? In my opinion, every university should have a peace studies department, not just London, of course it should, but all the others, Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, you name it. Gene Sharp, a colleague of mine in Harvard, he specialised in non-violence training. There have been some deep thinkings going on into it. Aung San Suu Kyi, it's a shame, in Burma, or Myanmar, she was a pioneer of non-violent solutions to the Burma problem, and yet now she's got caught up in this problem with, Burma and the Myanmar culture and its Buddhist nature versus the Rohingya and the Islamic challenge. How do you make non-violent our attitudes to the other when we're so bound up with our own identity? Well, you have to do what Buddha said and go beyond ego, and that means going beyond collective ego. We have to puncture this idea of nationalism, and bring some shunyata into it, bring some void nature into it, so that we realise that we don't need to hang on to that thing. Okay, I want to now come to talk about the question of Ireland and the election that's going on today, which is very historic. It looks like Sinn Fein, the most left-wing socialist party of the Irish candidates standing in the Republic of Ireland, has done very well. They may well even have the biggest number of votes. I mean, they are committed to the reunification of Ireland. They have also MPs up in the north. They're, I think, the second biggest party, the second biggest party up in the north of Ireland now. And they stand also in the south. So this is very interesting historically. Everyone says it's a sea change in Irish politics. Well, hey guys, I mean, I foresaw this in 2016 after the Brexit referendum. And I warned on day one that if the Conservative government interpreted that result as a mandate for Brexit of any kind, as if everyone had agreed, it would result in the ending of Northern Ireland as a part of the UK and the reunification with Ireland. I mean, I said this, and this is what's now happening. Because the people of Ireland are not stupid. They were learned intellectuals when the Anglo-Saxons were just coming off the ships, waving their axes. I'm sorry to have to say that, but that's a fact, historically. The Anglo-Saxons didn't arrive in Great Britain until the very late 400s AD. And they came in, with their battle axes and their sort of fury, and did, whereas the Irish had been living in Ireland with an advanced intellectual culture since the Bronze Age, so since at least 2000 BC. Tara and Newgrange and the Boyne Valley, all these things were flourishing hubs of culture. And these have come down orally in the Druid teaching traditions of Ireland. So the Druid culture of Ireland was over 2,500 years old when the Anglo-Saxons arrived on the British shores. Now just, what? Hang on. Nobody told me this at school. No, nobody told me either. I worked this out all by myself. So this is the next thing I've set up, the TRCVI, Truth and Reconciliation Commission for Britain and Ireland. And so that led me to visit Ireland many times, to meet intellectuals, philosophers, scholars in peace studies. I went and sat in the universities. I went to Trinity College many times, and worked for the Free University of Ireland, the Sorrel School in the Heron, based in Dublin. I was on their board for a time, given talks there in Dublin and all over Ireland, and I love it. It's in my blood. I'm part Irish through my father, and I was shocked when I learned more about it. Why is Irish history never taught in English schools? I went to a very good school. I had a very good education. We learned all about Latin classics. We learned about, Horatio Holds the Bridge. We never learned about Cuchulainn or the ancient Irish heroes. Many years later, when I researched all this independently, I discovered, well, okay, this is what's called silencing. This is the suppression of a culture. And that's what the British have done systematically, and not always systematically as in consciously. Some of it's just unconscious. I have many good British English friends who simply aren't aware of all this. They've never been to Ireland, they've never studied its history. Or they might have gone for a couple of holidays and that's it. Well, no, I looked into it with a huge amount of detail and scholarly effort. And so Sinn Féin's victory today, and, well, you know, literally the results are being announced probably around now, but they're certainly done very well, is a sea change for Irish politics. Now, it comes on the back of the fact that the EU announced yesterday what we all knew, I mean, common sense, is that if Ireland votes in a referendum, if Northern Ireland is given the chance to vote for reunion with the South, the Republic, which by the Good Friday Agreement has to be done, there's no ifs or buts. The only way of stopping that is if there's a direct rule and a seizure of power from Westminster and people are put in prison, you know, and fighting starts back out on the streets. If one doesn't go down the violent route, then a referendum on reunion for the North of Ireland with the South is mandatory under law, international law. Sinn Féin know that, they've been calling for this for the last, you know, couple of years. It'd be very interesting, well, I don't think it will be able to be stopped. I think that referendum will be happening within the next few months, actually. And the people of the Republic, by coming out and voting for Sinn Féin, they're saying, go for it, you know, this is what we want. We want our country to be united and live in peace within the European Union, which, you know, is to me the most sensible thing for Ireland. The people of the European Union, what they've said is that if that happens, then Northern Ireland would automatically rejoin the European Union. There wouldn't be any need for like renegotiations and stuff because the Republic's already in the European Union. So you're just clamping on a new part of it, and they would take on that identity as a European Union member state automatically. And it would go back to pretty much what it is already, or what it was when we were all in the EU together. And I think the people of Ireland will vote for that in a majority when given the chance. So this is a historic step on the road towards the reunification of Ireland and the rejoining of the EU by you know, the North. I've been all over Ireland. I've chaired meetings in Belfast. You'll find some of it on my YouTube channel. I'm deeply, you know, horrified at the idea of a resumption of the time of troubles, and this is what motivated me to set this up, to work with colleagues in the peace community, the peace movement, peace research community. I've been utterly appalled at the arrogance of some of my British colleagues, political scientists, academics, and above all politicians on the conservative wing of politics, who have completely ignored and sidelined this huge issue. At least Labour, on the whole, are aware of this and have said, look, hey, you know, we don't want the resumption of fighting in Ireland. And although Mr Corbyn has been a disappointment as a rallying, you know, symbol for the British people as a whole, he has been quite good on warning about Ireland, but he hasn't done the thinking, which he should have realised is stop Brexit, you know. I don't know, is his game all along been, well, let's get Brexit through and then we'll get a united Ireland and we'll get an independent Scotland? I mean, I don't know, is he that Machiavellian? If so, he's played a very, very clever hand, because that's what he's going to get. So yes, that's the second point I want to make, is that I think the order it's going to go is I think Irish unification and rejoining the EU is going to happen first, especially after this result today. Secondly, I think then Scotland will turn around to Westminster and say, look, you know, we're off too, you can't stop us. And this will create a huge groundswell